There we go. There's people
Right.
coming in.
There's people.
People.
I think this is the part where I go now pull chat up and pull all the Q&A up. So I got to make sure I don't miss them. Oh, goodness, covering my face with one of these windows. Nobody likes to look at my face. Well, I don't like looking at my face. I don't want to look at myself.
It's like listening to your own
Ah,
voice, that kind of thing, right? Like,
yeah, I really don't like listening to my own voice. I don't think a lot of people do though. And I don't have any, there's nothing wrong with my voice. When I hear it, I'm like, that's not like I'm nitpicking about something. It's just one of those things where I don't like hearing myself talk. It's weird. It's like an out of body experience. I don't like it.
it's just, yeah, it's just kind of awkward. I'm the same way. I think the biggest thing is it sounds so different than what it sounds like in your head, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's a big part of it. I know there's a sports radio guy in Kentucky. His name is Drew Franklin, and it's part of that KSR show that, you know, you've heard us talk about probably
Mhm.
500 times. Um, but I'd never really paid attention to it, and then somebody was like, "Hey, you sound just like Drew Franklin on KSR," and I was like, "Oh, that's weird," because I just hearing him talk like that doesn't sound anything like me. And so then I recorded myself one day. I was like, "Oh, wow, yeah, no, same voice. We're the same person. Like I think
We're the
I'm doing
same person.
KSR." Um, it's changed a little now. That was probably 10, 15 years ago. So, you know, my voice is different, his voice is different, but yeah, it always kind of
Sure.
it's always kind of weird.
Yeah, that would trip me out even more if someone said I sounded like someone and I didn't think it was true. And then I heard myself and was
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I am. Thankfully, that's never happened to me. That would break my mind.
Yeah.
Anyway, hi everybody as we sit here and
Hey,
chat with each other. Hello, Josh and Lou in chat. Appreciate you guys saying hello. Uh, yeah, we're just kind of
Steve.
getting rolling, let people roll in. We don't have Oscar today, so I don't
Yeah.
know. For those of you who come here often and you've seen Pink and I without Oscar, you know that we just kind of wing things. We talk about whatever, we say whatever we feel like. It's nice to not have the, dad on the call. You know what I mean? Am I
Yeah.
growing a
Yeah.
ponytail? Anonymous attendee yes. No, I do I am growing a mullet. I do technically have a mullet though. It needs to be trimmed down a little bit more. But it's yeah, not quite growing a ponytail, but sure, I could throw it in one now if I wanted to. My hair is technically longer than my wife's now, so we're getting there. We're getting there.
Very fun.
Haxton
So
Hop
it's
was
funny.
good yesterday. I am glad to hear it. I did not go. I stayed here on the West Coast over in Washington State, but I I've heard some a little bit of stuff trickling in that it went pretty well. Glad to hear it.
Yeah, yeah, I heard good things, and then I got a call from one of my guys who was at Hacks and Hops yesterday, and it sounded like a party going on behind him. So it must have been a pretty good time, at
It
least.
must have been great. Yeah. And
Yeah,
we talked to some people today who said some people stayed out and had a late night, so it's always a sign of good things.
that's why email's been quiet today. Okay, got
Yeah.
it.
People are recovering.
Yep.
Cool, cool, cool. Well, yeah, and like always when Dad's not on the call, we generally have kind of lighter on the topics. We kind of just want to, I don't know, interact more, chat more, BS about whatever. So if you guys have anything you want to talk about, not that we're lacking some topics, we do have some, but if you want to talk about anything, throw it in chat. Let us know. Let's talk about it and stuff. Let's keep it interactive and whatnot. But yeah, hey, it's Friday the 13th, Pink. I don't
It
know.
is Friday the 13th. That hit me earlier. I didn't realize it until
Yeah,
like midday. Yeah,
spooky. It's almost October.
spooky times.
It's like your favorite time of
Yeah,
the year, right?
it is. Yeah, I mean, I love spooky season.
Yeah.
It's been curating the list of random weird horror movies to watch as we're rolling in into the season here. I just walked in the house a minute ago, and it looks like my wife and the kids stopped by the pumpkin patch on the way home because my house is now covered in pumpkins, and
Yeah.
so those will all be rotten in about 2 weeks, and we'll have to buy more. But
Of course.
it's okay.
We
Yeah.
actually planted pumpkins.
Mm,
We're gonna grow our own this year. Spoiler, they also spoiled. Yeah, it
mm.
didn't work out. We just didn't take care of it. Look, we're not good plant growers, gardeners. We're not good at that. Last year, we decided to grow vegetables, fruits and vegetables type stuff. You know what I mean? I say fruits in the looser term, like peppers are a fruit. And we did great, and that was the problem. We were the problem was the success. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
had way too many squash, way too many cucumbers, tomatoes were outrageous. I mean, like the only thing I didn't feel like I had too much of was hot peppers. And yeah, anyway. So
Yeah.
this
Well,
year we were like, we're not gonna grow anything. And my wife was like, but what if we grew pumpkins? And then we just like got out of the habit of maintaining them because we just had one thing. Yeah.
we don't have to go into the details on here, but you're in humidity land now too, and so that's a new challenge with pumpkin growing. It's one we have to deal with too.
Yeah,
They tend to mold and
that's
pick
what
up
happened.
things.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
needed to.
Um,
I don't know the details of trying to do that, and I shouldn't have bothered. But yeah, Phasmophobia games win anytime you want, Brian. Anytime you want, I'll go play. We'll play. Phasmophobia is the one where you go in the houses. Is that the right one? The VR option. Oh, I love that one. I had my wife play it one couple years back on the VR headset, and she's like, nope, and just like threw it off. You know what I mean? It was great.
Very
It's great,
cool.
great, great. All right. Well, cool,
It's been a
cool,
bit.
cool. It has
It's
been a
been a bit.
bit. We canceled
Yeah.
last month. Well, we delayed last month and then canceled it because we're, I guess, irresponsible. I'm not sure.
I mean, it's close enough. Yeah, it's good enough. Yeah.
Last month was, DEF CON. DEF CON happens in August, and every year, and we do these generally at the kind of beginning-ish of the month, right? And so every year it's like, oh, you have Hackle Box planned the when you're going to be in town for DEF CON. And every year we toy with the idea of like, let's do it at DEF CON. Like, let's do it there, either at the conference itself or just like at one of the houses we're staying in while we're out there. And what a great idea that always sounds like. And then we are there and it's like, we don't have time for that. We can't do that. There's too much going on. We can't get everyone together. It's a pain. And we end up not doing it. And so we knew better this year going into it. And Oscar was like, we should just delay it. Let's not try to do it. We don't ever do it. And I was like, and then it was me. I chimed in and said, but I really think it would be cool if we did it. We can do it. We can do it. We'll get some other people. It'll be fun. We'll do it poolside or something at the house. Whatever. I spoke up. I opened my big mouth, and they were like, "Fine, well, that sounds great." And then we got there, and it was like, "This doesn't make sense." And so we didn't do it again. And then afterwards, there was too much travel, too much other things happening. I think we just ended up having to cancel it. So we haven't been here.
Yeah, we were all super busy, right? Catching up from DEF CON
Yeah.
and things like that too, because I think we tried to do it the week after, and yeah, it just didn't work out. That's okay. That's okay.
So it's been a couple
We can
months since
catch
we've
up.
seen you.
Yeah.
Did anyone go to Black Hat DEFCON? Check that out. I mean, I know generally every year some people go. They're chatting up in here. I had a good
Yeah.
time. Pinky unfortunately could not make it, but he participated from afar.
Yeah, still had a good time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got in
One
on some of the shenanigans, you know.
one of the things we always do, people talk about it. We've talked about it a decent amount in the past. We like to do the competitions. We like to go to the competition floor, see what's going on, and it's kind of spread out. We have so many people now, though, that it becomes like this kind of cluster. It's like, we took 30 people to DEF CON this year. And it's like, what do you do with what competitions do 30 people do? You know what I mean? A lot of them are like limited to like 4 or 5 people, or something like that. So you're trying to split everyone up and try to keep everyone busy and trying to like, but like not like they're assigned to be busy, just trying to make sure everybody has something to do if they want to. And it's crazy. But yeah, you participated in one remotely, and I feel like that's probably a little less crazy. I feel like that's a little bit more like you can keep it under control a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. And I mean, the blue team's a little smaller too, so it's a little easier to kind of get those teams in order, that kind of thing. But then also just classic DEF CON, right? We have no details about anything going into it, and then so we were trying to split teams up in a way that made sense because we had a few people that were remote, and then we had a bunch of people that were on site, and so it looked like some were going to be on site only, and some were going to be remote available. And then it turned out that kind of flipped when we got there. It was like technically you had to be on site to get a code, but it was actually a better one to do remotely. And
Mhm.
yeah, so a little bit of organizational chaos, I think, for all of us this year, but it's kind of to be expected. We go into it, it's like, here's what we think we're gonna do, and then let's figure it out when we get in.
Yeah, I
But yeah,
stopped
we had
trying
a
to
good
plan
time
it.
with them.
People just are like, "What's the plan? What's the plan?" I'm like, "There's no plan. Just get there and
There is no
find out.
plan. Just show up and see what
Just
happens.
show up and see what happens."
Yeah.
But yeah, we
Yeah.
had a good. I thought it was fun. I didn't go to Black Hat this year. Most of the time I don't, unless I'm doing some training or something there. Normally we do have some people that go out there, but I don't think we did at FRSecure this year have anyone that went to
Mhm.
Black Hat. And then, but DEF CON was good. I felt like the venue they did it in this year, though, it was kind of a change, a departure from their previous stuff, and kind of getting I don't know, banned. I don't know if banned is the right word, but like they weren't able to do it in the Caesars stuff, and so they went with the convention center. It was actually really nice. I thought it was like very spaced out. It seemed like they had room for a lot more stuff. There was like a lot of new things there. It was didn't feel crowded, felt really good. So
Yeah, I
enjoyed
know
it.
Caesars a couple of years ago felt really packed. Like, I mean, it was, and then I don't even think the crowd was as big then as it was this year. So it was,
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, things like that happen when you have a major breach and the insurance companies get nervous,
Wow. You're gonna have major breaches either way it happens, but
True. No, that's true. Yeah, but yeah, something about maybe just inviting 50,000 potential no good nicks into the into
Mhm.
the building maybe
One of
get
my
a
favorite
little nervous.
things in when I'm in Vegas for DEF CON is talking to a lot of the locals. And like not like I'm inquiring, I'm not reaching like going, hey, what do you think about all the people in town? It's just they always offer it up when they find out why you're there. And so like I've had so many weird reactions to different things. There's like this one common reaction I see all the time is that there's a lot of locals like employees at stores or wherever you might run into them, and that they don't realize yet that DEF CON is happening, and then they have it in their head that like when DEF CON's happening, you're getting hacked 24/7, right? Which is not true, but I mean obviously there's
Yeah.
risks, but there's risks always, right? And but they have this in their head, and so there's like this kind of a thing about it where like when they realize it, they'll pull out their phone immediately and like turn off Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and I'm always like, I mean, it's probably a smart idea anyway, right? Like, so I'm
Yeah.
not gonna
Yeah. Just
stop you. You should, because I like my Bluetooth and Wi-Fi turned off on my phone when I'm out and about and doing things if I'm at my job or something, whatever. So but yeah, kind of funny.
yeah. 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 It's good times. I guess we should probably talk about some security stuff.
I
Looking
mean,
at
it's been
our
13
list
minutes.
here.
We can go and talk about something else, right?
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
man.
so one fun one that actually would be a good one out at DEF CON that
Mm,
we kind of just were talking about here is kind of the resurgence of USB drive attacks, right?
mm,
I know you
yeah.
guys do this as part of your testing sometimes, or the red team does anyway.
Yeah,
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 just
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's the yeah. USB attacks are always fun. I mean, there's used to be able to do a lot more. I mean, I shouldn't say used to be able to do a lot more, but used to be able to do some stuff. Back when like USB auto run was like a thing that was always on, like kind of like CD auto run. I mean, back in the day,
yeah,
you could drop CDs in parking lots and stuff like that too, and get the kind of same effect. Obviously, some of that's been fixed, but there's still a decent amount of like malicious USB devices that can like emulate a human input device
hmm
um and type things out, or just like our favorite is just to like come up with different fun document names or executable names that you want someone to like be enticed by.
yeah,
One of the things that we've had, like you always you want to think about like who your target is, right? And if you're trying to like get a swath of people, it's like how do you kind of set the stage? What's your pretext for this, like this USB device? Like how does it make sense that you're going to have financial data and something completely different than that on the same, drive and stuff? Will people see it and be immediately go like, "Oh, this is bogus," or will they
that's
go,
weird. Yeah,
"I want to look at that financial data," which they do. They always want to look at. You just put like list of salaries dot doc, you know what I mean, on a USB
hmm
drive and drop it somewhere, and people love to click on those. But yeah, what is
yeah,
this?
yeah. You're gonna
What this particular one in the news though? What kind of stuff is going on there?
yeah. This one's to be fair, it's primarily Asian Pacific countries that are being targeted with this one. It's a group called Mustang Panda, which is just a great name as well. And like all of them, they
Is
have
it?
like yeah, it's I don't know. It's just it's a unique name, I'll say.
Sure.
They've got a bunch of other ones too, like Camaro Dragon, Luminous Moth, all names for different, you know, people who track them, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But yeah, this one's they've got a worm that they're throwing out there. So it's a malware called Pubload. It's a self-propagating worm, which is kind of neat to see again. I feel like we don't see that as much over the last few years, but doing that and then also doing some kind of spear phishing to kind of throw that malware out there as well. And so again, at the moment it's more Asian Pacific, but at the same time, right? I mean, if attackers see success with this, they're gonna play with it. And out here in the sticks where I'm at, if I find a thumb drive, it's probably okay. I mean, I'm still not plugging it into anything, but if you're in a highly populated area where this would be effective, sprinkle a few of those around a parking lot and see what happens.
I do not
So.
recommend you sprinkle these around malicious thumb drives around parking lots. We are not lawyers.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not telling you to do this. No, I'm just saying as an attacker, if I'm thinking about it, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
No. but now I want to go sprinkle them in the sticks. So that's the thing.
So that I find one just
Yeah,
randomly down here by the creek or
yeah.
something. Like, what is this?
Who knows, man? You never know.
God,
Down by the
you,
creek, finding a thumb drive down by the creek. You go out for some fishing. You're like, oh, look at that. Take that home, pop it in.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I mean,
mean,
obviously, the lesson, always the lesson. Don't grab random USB drives, plug them in unless you know where you're
right.
plugging them into. If you're doing like a forensic station that you can, you know, do it properly, by all means. But if you're not, don't. And
Good
maybe
point.
think about making it so you can't plug USB devices in to
Definitely a good move. I'm always a little surprised at some of the organizations we talk to, like not specifically them, but just the fields they're in where that's not disabled.
yeah,
And yeah, it's definitely a good move if if you have the ability to disable USB devices being plugged in, right, limit it down to the known keyboard and the known mouse for whatever that's should be being used there. That's always a good technical control there. Um, and again, user education, but sometimes that temptation's too much, right? I mean,
yeah. Oh yeah.
it's
And it's silly
so
too. It's like if you get there's a lot of people out there who feel like, you plug in the device, plugging in the device in itself is not the vulnerability. It's opening the files. So like a lot of people they're just miseducated on that and they will go ahead and plug them in to take a look. Now the reality is there are plenty of, bad USB devices out there that will just act as a keyboard, type something in and can execute something on plugin, right? And other types of things that can happen in that situation. So we should train people not to plug them in at all. But
yeah,
then there's people who like they plug them in because they think that's not where it's going to happen. It's going to be the files themselves, and then they just get taken off guard by the files. So like they don't look malicious. They don't seem like they're malicious. If I was trying to get you to click on something malicious, why would I name it that? Why would I put that kind of file
yeah,
on there? And that's actually it's like being more like normal, right? Like I guess you're always trying to emulate normalcy, but like a lot of people will bait people with things like we were just talking about salary information or something like that, right? But when you have like, your favorite pie recipe on there, like why would you, if you're going to try to entice me to click on something, why would it be a pie recipe, right? I'm not saying that that's something that's worked for us in the past. I'm just saying that like it's things like that. We have literally gotten IT people to click on executables because we put a thumb drive that had a um, console emulators and ROMs,
hmm,
and they found it, plugged it in, and then they were like, "Oh, neat! Someone's little, gaming thumb drive, right? Can play some old Nintendo games, play Mario Brothers again. I missed that game, nostalgia." And then they run it, and
yeah,
why would that be a malicious thing that you would put on there, right? So
yeah. Who's going to do that?
no,
Yeah, but it is I kind of said I was surprised when don't see it disabled, but at the same time, like the overhead for that is can be tiresome for like particularly small IT teams, right? Because you got to have the help desk to have the ability to enable it when they do need to plug something in. You got to verify that this is what a legit thing to plug in, that kind of thing. And so,
Mhm.
I guess surprise shouldn't be the correct term there, but if you have that ability and you can definitely turn that off because you're going to get somebody. And even to like the devices that Eric mentioned there that kind of mimic a human interface device, right? We've definitely seen those in cases where, some sort of publicly visible system got one of those plugged in, and the attack started from there. So, because they look like a keyboard to the system, and so it'll just pick it up and read it and go, things like that. So, yeah, definitely a good one to watch out for. Um, yeah, not a lot else there on that one. Just kind of, hey, this is a
Yeah,
thing that seems to be happening a little more
always upticks.
again.
You see a lot of social engineering related things that kind of go in cycles. You know what I mean? So you
Yeah.
see like what are they calling quishing, right? Like QR phishing.
Hmm.
And then like we're to see some USBs again, and it'll go back to something else, and it'll be something else. And it's always nice to kind of just know what trends are, even if they're other places of the world, because generally they're kind of going around the same way. Did you see
Yeah.
this in chat from Cliff talking about Brutus botnet? Did you know much about that?
Yeah. So
Specifically
we've
calling out here. I'll just gonna talk about the
yeah.
message because the message is just to us, not to all chat. But talking about having to focus on some remediation and various other tactics to combat Brutus botnet. Disable like enabling better logging, disabling the web UI for VPN, obfuscating URLs, stuff like that. Switching from Radius to SAML. Um, and then a specific note here too about MFA causing account lockouts from attempts, which is interesting. But yeah,
Yeah.
are you able to kind of speak to any of that?
Yeah, so I mean, we've looked at the Brutus botnet stuff a little bit, not a ton, but I'll kind of speak more in general around botnets as well as like those are good steps, right, to take. Um, I will say the switching to SAML may have some unintended consequences because you may get some lockouts in a different way. So something to think about there. But there may be more controls you can set up around that as well. And so when it comes to these types of things, it really one of the bigger things to have out there is some kind of like web application firewall, something that sits out front and kind of just drop this traffic before it ever even gets processed. But that is difficult when you're talking botnets, right? Because it's coming from everywhere. I don't remember what specifically the Brutus one targets. Um, I would assume it's a host of things like access points and things like that. I mean, I don't know, maybe they're using smart fridges and things like that now too, but it ends up being a really tricky thing to block because that traffic comes from a lot of different places, and sometimes it looks somewhat legitimate. Um, but yeah, it's always tough to deal with those. It kind of think about it in the same way of like uh, distributed denial of service attacks. Those get really tough to kind of thwart a lot of times. One thing that you can kind of rely on a little bit is that a lot of times they're renting space in those botnets to run these things, or it's some botnet that I mean, if they own it, they could certainly do different things. But so you got to think about it on cost too, right? Like you almost just want to make it so difficult that it's not worth their time. And, you're dropping so much of their traffic, they're not really doing much for you, that kind of thing. And it gets a little tough, but yeah, I think Cliff had some good steps in there, right? I am curious about the MFA lockouts. Was it so Cliff? Was it actually locking out because they were failing MFA, or was it just the login attempts were causing lockouts? Use an IP 5 times and then drop it. Yeah, exactly. A bazillion IPs. It's a very good way to put that. Yeah, and that's where it gets tough is trying to filter all that out.
Yeah, I mean, and this day and age too, where we're at with how many hosted services are like, hosting services that exist, between AWS and Google and Azure or whatever, and various other ones. I mean, there are so many ways to get access to a massive IP space as well. I mean, there's plenty of projects out there. I mean, one of the ones like Fireprox, which is using AWS to like their firewall stuff to proxy your traffic through. And
Hmm.
so you can just like stand up a thing that just every time you hit it, it rotates an IP out of like kind of a set of around 250 or so. Not a single /24. It just happens to line up in size, but you can cycle things through that, and then you can stand those up constantly on all the different locations and across the world, and then you could do that with every different service provider. Even you could have access to thousands of IPs legitimately. Then you
Yeah,
take into consideration botnets have access to a bunch of IPs from their stuff too, and it gets silly. Blocking IPs these days is really tough.
it is. Yeah, I mean, I know we worked a case recently, and it was one single piece of malware that we found out there that had 1,200 known associated IPs with it. And it was like, you can block all those, and I would recommend that you do if it's not going to mess your firewall up, kind of thing. But also, if that's 1,200 known, there's probably twice as many total. Those are just the ones that people have seen and reported.
Yeah.
And Cliff did clarify it was account lockouts from the bad logins, not the MFA. So they weren't getting to the MFA. So that's I got you. That makes sense.
I have seen, and I
Yeah.
can't say specifically with SAML versus Radius versus whatever, but I have seen some interesting implementations in VPNs where, depending on the link, the authentication method and link, I've seen some weird stuff where a single bad attempt will lock out an account. We had
Mhm.
again, this isn't super helpful, more just anecdotal, but we had a client we were working with a couple years ago, and we went to go do a password spray, an attempt on an external network, and we did one login, like our very first one we did, we locked out all of their accounts.
Oh no.
And they came to us like upset with us, and right, I mean, I get it, right?
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
it's like we're doing a pen test, we did something and it locked everyone out. But we immediately went, checked all of our logs, made sure, and we're like, we only sent one attempt. Yes, one attempt against every user, fair, right? But like one attempt, and so it should not have locked them out. um and so they went back and determined, they actually checked and they realized that, yeah, they failed one single attempt at login on their VPN. It was sending like 5 attempts, but it was their VPN that was doing it. It was their authentication method that was doing it. It was like retrying or something. And so it was locking out a single person. I'm surprised they hadn't known until we did the pen test.
Yeah.
You'd think they
Yeah.
were
Probably.
locking
I
accounts
wonder
all
if
the
they have like
time.
like a shorter unlock period, right? Like 15 minutes or something. So it just never really bubbled up to be a problem until it was everybody.
Yeah.
I will note here that Cliff noted, yeah, Tor nodes, iPhones, cameras basically came from the internet. Yeah, exactly. That's how those work. And so just for anyone listening and thinking about the Brutus one, Cliff noted that their bots cannot handle SAML. So yeah, that would be a good
Yeah.
way to handle that there then. So that's very cool. Yeah, that's good to know. And like I said, we hadn't dug into it a whole lot. Unfortunately, it's one of those things where we will encounter those, maybe in an investigation we're doing, but we're not going deep into detail because it's difficult to kind of mitigate a lot of times. And so usually we find other methods to mitigate, like I said, drop in traffic, that kind of thing. And yeah, so a little different than what we normally run into, but those are definitely good tips. So I appreciate that, Cliff. Thanks for getting in there, throwing some good info out there.
Yeah. Good
Yeah,
info to share with everybody. Good topic to chat about.
yeah,
Appreciate it. Speaking of
yeah.
VPNs, though, since we're talking about VPNs,
Hmm.
right? We're talking about, yeah. I mean, um, there's some article came out, I don't know, week or two ago.
Yeah,
Cyber attackers are spoofing Palo Alto VPNs to spread some malware, using SEO poisoning, or basically, kind of getting their stuff ranked up in there, or getting their stuff, with some AdWords maybe, and getting you to come through and think that you were getting legitimate stuff, and you were not, right? Um, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
we've
It's
talked about this a little bit. I don't know.
we
What kind
have
of stuff have you
yeah.
seen on that front?
Yeah, yeah, and so this one, yeah, definitely not a necessarily a new technique. It's just more the impact of it because it is the Palo Alto VPN that they're targeting, and I know a lot of people have moved over Palo Altos over the last few years. Um, they've had fewer problems than a lot of the other vendors, and I'm not bashing anybody or anything like that, but it's just that's how things go, right? And they do make some good products. But yeah, so folks have moved over to that. So a lot of people using the Palo Alto VPN. So attackers, as always, right? Hey, what's everybody using? Let's target that. Um, this one in particular is yeah, like Eric said, kind of targeting SEO, right? Getting them pushed up the rankings there. So that if you've got a user that's like, oh, I need to get on the VPN for work, I've not installed it yet or whatever, let me just go Google Palo Alto VPN and they find this. Um, one thing that I like to tell people on this one too is, kind of have that internal published app system, right? Find, some way that you direct people to download the legitimate apps that you've downloaded and verified and that kind of thing, right? They're not having to go out and Google and find these things. Um, and I like to use that for a lot of tools as well, right? I mean, Notepad++ was being targeted about a year ago. Same with like the Zoom client, things like that. So, if you can set up those internal repositories for people to grab those, obviously make sure if you're the one setting that up, you're verifying that you're getting the right version. But yeah, this one, they were using a malware called Wikiloader, which I had heard of, also known as Whaling Crab. But it's
Great. That's a great name. Wiggling
yeah,
crab.
that is a good name. Yeah, yeah. This has been around since like yeah 2022, but been around a little bit.
Yeah.
It is a loader as well, right? So it's like first line, right? It's the thing that comes down and pulls down whatever other bad is coming, and so they can use that in a lot of different ways. Um, but yeah, just tell folks to be careful of that. Don't be grabbing it from the Google, or at least if you are, make sure you're getting it legitimately from Palo Alto site, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, it might also just be, a good opportunity, or a good, I mean, catalyst to, another way to train people up is just how they're browsing the internet, what they're trusting, things like that. It is very possible for someone to buy AdWords for something and pop their thing to the top, and a lot of people click those. I'm always surprised. I just like inherently never click them unless I
Yeah.
want them to get charged for my click, because I don't like that company. You know what I mean? Something
I
like
do
that.
the
Unless I'm
same
just
thing.
being,
That's funny. That's
mm-hmm,
exactly my thought
mm-hmm,
process. Yep.
mm-hmm.
Yep.
No, but all of that aside, all spite aside, I mean, I'm always cautious about that. If I see the company I'm looking for, it has a paid at link, and then their link is at the top right below, I'm clicking the one below. I don't want to click the ad
Mhm.
one. I don't want to pay for that, or click that one that's been paid for, because I'm just cautious of it. But a lot of people are not like that, right? A lot of people will just be like, the first thing at the top of my list, click it. Let's see if that one's my thing, right? They don't really even pay attention to that they're paid for. I'm not saying that that's always the case in these types of things, but that is one of the cases sometimes. So just kind of helping educate people about, verifying the links they're clicking even when they're searching for something. I think a lot of people are like, well, if I didn't intend to receive it, if it's a text message or if it's an email or chat message and I didn't intend to receive that link, maybe I'd be cautious of it. But when I'm out searching for something, I'm looking for these links. I'm doing that. No one's putting these in front of me, but sometimes people are putting them in front of you. And so trying to be cautious of that in general too. It's a good training area.
Got a stick in my shirt. I was trying to
That's
figure
a
out what was going
stick
on
and
back there.
not a
Yeah.
wolf spider or something.
Yeah, well, that was my initial thought, Russ. That's why I got concerned. It was about the size of a spider leg. As well, our spiders here, which I've shown Eric. We have spiders here that'll carry you off.
We don't need to talk
So
about spiders, man.
I mean, we could I
I
could
brought it up. I'm
share
sorry. I
I could share
immediately have
pictures.
regrets. No, it's fine. It's fine. We don't
Yeah,
have to.
yeah. All
Um,
right.
yeah.
Uh, it's funny. We did have a topic we considered covering around the scattered spider APT, but that's something we kind of talked about and didn't break it because we could talk about spiders there too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Could
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's talk about
it's
something really
spooky season,
scary
man.
instead. I don't need to talk about spiders. They're not scary. They're just I don't want them biting me or crawling on me or being in my house. Um, but things that are scary, are like, actively exploited CVEs. I mean, kind of scary at least if you don't know about them.
True. Yeah, that is true. We,
If
we
those are
talked
living
about
in
the
your
mic.
house.
Yeah, those are not good. So Patch Tuesday this past this I guess it was this
This
Tuesday.
past Patch Tuesday.
Yeah, this past Patch Tuesday, man, that's hard to say too. Um, was a big one. I think it was the biggest one in the last few years, if I remember correctly. It was like 79 or something like that. And with that, there were four different 0 days. Sorry, Microsoft Patch Tuesday, just to be clear here. A couple of them were interesting in that. So one or two of them affected, and Eric will have to maybe grab the CVEs here because my notes got jumbled. Um, for the publisher, for Microsoft Publisher, which I know isn't it's not as widely used as say Word or Outlook or something like that, but it's definitely still out there. Essentially allowed a remote code execution from a specially crafted oh yeah, and the Unpatched Tuesday in chat there. We'll get to that as well. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, could be a really effective phishing method, that kind of thing with the publisher files. Basically a
Yeah.
bypass of current controls.
There were two different CVEs that were kind of around bypassing some security functionality in general, right? And one of them kind of was outlined specifically around publisher, and another one's just kind of generally the mark of the web. For people who, I mean, maybe are loosely familiar or not familiar with mark of the web, it's essentially an alternate data stream, which is a functionality that can, exist on NTFS systems and stuff. But essentially, it's a kind of an alternate piece of data that's attached to a file that says something about the file. You can take advantage of them in other ways too, but it just says like, hey, the zone that this came from, right? Is it a trusted zone or an untrusted zone? And when you download things from Windows or on Windows, from the internet or from other places, sometimes they come from locations that are unknown. It'll kind of add this tag to it, this identifier to it, right? It's possible to remove that, and that gets removed sometimes when you say, yes, I trust this, or something like that. Or if you create the file yourself, it'll have a zone that's trusted or just will be missing that identifier. And so essentially there was a method for crafting a publisher file that kind of was able to bypass that mark and that thing that is used for a lot of security stuff. When you grab a document, someone emails you a document, you download it and you go to open it, and it says, do you want to enable macros, do you want to enable editing? That's because of the mark of the web is on it saying, hey, this came from somewhere else, right? And then once you say you trust it, generally some of those times you won't have to you want to say open for editing every time, right? Or maybe even enabling those macros. So this is just a way that was in Microsoft Publisher to bypass that functionality. The other so that was CVE 2024-38226, and then the one that's kind of general mark of the web is 2024-38217. That one's a little bit more general for all types of files. There's been some different things for a while now about bypassing mark of the web. It's been around for a long time, the mark of the web stuff, but it really kind of started getting talked about a lot more, and a lot more security stuff started depending on it. I'd say in the last few years, right? And so there's been a lot more focus on trying to bypass it in some ways. And there's been ways, like the way that was patched in this last Tuesday has been around for, I mean, 5-6 years or more. This isn't a new thing that they found out about and they patched. They just finally found a way to patch some of this stuff, I guess, because it's a
Yeah.
tough thing to do. Well, one of the ways, or the main way, it's hard to really see exactly, or for me to know exactly what they patched, but some of the stuff that I was reading, we're talking about specifically like link files, like LNKs. Manipulation of link files can, if you kind of malform it with a maybe a legacy way of doing things or something like that, or just maybe other types of malformation that Microsoft or Windows can kind of fix and automatically handle. When it does that process, it was doing things in a weird order, and it would kind of remove that mark of the web essentially, right, and kind of bypass that. And so you could use a link to something, and then it would overwrite that mark of the web or that ADS when they were doing that stuff, and it was allowed to get past it. So it sounds like they've fixed up some of that. I'm sure there's still ways to bypass some stuff. They're probably constantly going to be working on it, but that was one of the things that was fixed up. So at least things are a little bit safer on that way, or in
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah, definitely glad to see that because I mean that is useful. If you download a file, a lot of times you'll get you go to try to run it and it just won't execute. So, a lot of times go to properties and there's a checkbox there for unblock this file. That's
Mhm.
another piece that mark of the web is used for there. If I remember correctly, it's zone identifier 3. I'm trying to remember back, but I think it's
Yeah.
3. Not that you ever really see these things. You kind of only see them in doing like MFT analysis and that kind of thing. Um, and a lot of those tools are actually pretty good at calling out, hey, this one has a zone identifier, so there's at least something for you to look at there. But yeah, glad to see that they're patching that one up. That one's a pretty I mean, it's scary, right? I mean, it is a thing, and like Eric mentioned too, a lot of security tools rely on that even outside of just Windows native stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I mean, a lot of EDRs and stuff these days are really trying to take advantage of that too.
mhm.
If that has that mark on it, then, don't trust it as much. Um, Having it obviously doesn't fix everything, and there's ways around it. There's going to probably continue to be some ways to bypass it that get discovered over time. And for that matter, like as an attacker on a machine, like if I'm, me or one of my guys are doing an internal pen test or something like that, and I need to, for some reason, do some living out the land method of pulling a file down to a machine and it gets the mark of the web on it, and you can use PowerShell or various other tools and stuff like that to remove the mark, and then run the application or run the thing too. So it's not like a silver bullet by any chance or by any stretch, but it's something, and they're working on making it better. So it's good.
yeah, and kind of along the same lines of ways to bypass it, right? It was CV 2024 43491, which was uh, kind of it's a way to roll back some Microsoft fixes that came out. So I know Lou in the chat mentioned MS
Yeah,
Unpatch Tuesday,
yeah,
and so I saw some creative names for that. I was trying to remember as I think one of them was like oh man, now I can't remember them, of course, when I was thinking about it, but yeah, that one's a little bit concerning. This one was specifically about rolling back some patches from March that were around Windows 10. That said, though, I can see maybe utilizing this in different ways if they figured out a way to kind of do that. But
yeah.
um,
Well, and the
eh,
concerning part here too is like making sure you're patched and you're good now too. Is like, you got to make sure you have kind of a couple different updates and like
mhm.
roll up patches and stuff. You got to have the one from then plus the one from now, and make sure everything is in order there and nothing got missed. It didn't roll back and then you got the new one but you didn't get the old one. um so it's definitely one of those ones to look into. Make sure you're good, make sure you're fully patched up, nothing got rolled back or anything like that. You're in a good
Yeah,
place.
it did note that there's two different KBs. Actually, I'm just going to throw these in the chat because I don't want to read them off because those are long. But there's a couple there to grab, and so if anybody's played with Microsoft patches and older Microsoft patches and things like that, that gets really tricky. And sometimes you end up down a very deep rabbit hole trying to find the patch that actually works, and then combine it with some other hot fix or something like that. So better to get those now as opposed to here in a year when Microsoft's already, they've tried to roll it into another patch and it's not quite working. I know we ran into this recently with a patch for 2008 servers. One of our tools wouldn't install without it. So we tried to get the patch. Microsoft's done away with the patch because they rolled it into another one. Went to that one. They've rolled that one into another one. Finally, it just came down to there was an entirely different uh, patch that had to be installed that would maybe do it. And so, yeah, it gets really tricky the farther out you get on those. But yeah, that one was an interesting one to come out there. So
Yeah.
definitely
On the
definitely keep
note,
up to date on them.
kind of unrelated specifically to this, but just on the note of patches being a pain sometimes, right?
Mhm.
Um, there are definitely patches that come out all the time and roll up patches and stuff that are like will apply most of the fix, but not all of it. I imagine a lot of you are familiar with that. You've dealt with that over the years. But if you're not actively looking at those patches when they come through and making sure that there's no other interaction that you need to have with the machine, you might not be fully patched up on things. I'm not saying that it pertains to these ones in particular, just kind of reminded me talking about this scenario. Make sure that you're trying to look into that, or that you're looking into that, and you're making sure that patches are fully applied. There's no interaction needed from you or changes needed from you, either through policy or some other thing, registry, etc. So
Yeah.
we run into it a lot on the scanning side of the world, like the vulnerability scanning. We have a lot of things where some vulnerability will flag, and then someone reaches out to us and says, "This is a false positive. We have this patch applied." And then every time we end up spending a bunch of time going through trying to figure out why that would be the case. And it's always because there was some manual part that needed to take place to fully apply that patch, and it never was done. And so it happens a lot. It's very common that people think they're patched and they're not patched because they didn't apply something manually.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an annoying part of the Microsoft patch process. Like there's just you really have to dig into the patch notes every Tuesday and make sure you're kind of hitting all those points. I know I've definitely seen that, with your, with the folks doing scanning and that kind of thing in the past as well. So yeah, keep that in mind. Kind of moving along, talking about other patches too, here in the
Well,
last
there's
few
one more we didn't
days.
talk
Oh,
about on
did we
that
not
one,
get them?
right? There was
Okay.
a
Yep.
privilege
Sorry.
escalation
Hmm.
2024-38014. It's a 7.8 rating, and I think that's mostly just because you have to be on the machine because it's Privesc, right? It's
Yeah.
not like you can execute or anything remotely off of it, but just pointing that one out, like the 7.8, yeah, it's a little lower on the scale. It's not low, right? But probably a good one to take it or to get patched up. If you had someone living in your environment, they're gonna be able to take advantage of that and escalate on that machine. And it is actively exploited as far as I know. So um
Yeah.
hopefully nobody has anybody living in the network right now, but
I hope
get it
not.
patched
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's funny. The next one that I was going to talk about too is also a 7.8.
Mm-hmm.
And this was an Adobe CVE, CVE 2024 41869. There is a proof of concept out in the wild for this one, so it, does have the potential to be exploited.
Yeah, whenever there's a
Unfortunately,
POC, assume it is being exploited.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Unfortunately, this one, not a ton of details around kind of what's going on with it. Um, we could probably get that POC and take a look at it, but I know this just hit our radar about 2 hours ago. Um, so something to keep in mind there with that one. And then also there's a secondary fix. I guess they already tried to patch this once. It didn't quite work. And there's a secondary fix in the works. Does not look like it's been released yet. But the Adobe ones always make me a little nervous. We haven't seen a ton in a while. I mean, it seems like it's been a little calmer on that, but I know for a long time you know, uh, we'd see any sort of Adobe activity in an investigation and be immediately suspicious because there were a lot of things that could go wrong there.
I think
Um,
I've mentioned it before on this on Hackle Box, but I'm not sure. But I actually have a separate Windows virtual machine just for Adobe.
no, for your
Like
Adobe
for
products you're
Adobe,
using,
for specifically
or
just for Adobe Acrobat Reader and Signer. Like
oh
if I have to sign documents, I
yeah,
have to open PDFs. That's what I do it in. I have a separate VM for it. I don't trust Adobe. I haven't. And that's overreaction. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying everybody out there should have a virtual machine dedicated to Adobe, but I do. I'm kind of a
yeah.
weirdo like that.
It usually depends on where they come from, but yeah, there's certainly times that I will go spin up a VM in the lab to go open and or sign a document if I need
I get them from
to.
HR and I open them in my VM.
I mean, fair. That's fair. Uh,
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with being cautious, man. I get it. I definitely get it. So I know, we'll often get handed text documents and stuff in an investigation. It's like I don't really think there's anything that can go wrong with a text document, but I'm still not opening that on my main
Mhm.
machine. It's from an investigation. I'm pulling it into the lab. So I
Yeah.
always a little
If
careful
also
with
if you're
that.
out there and you're applying to a job that I'm going to see your resume, please stop sending me Word documents. Okay? Stop
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Oh goodness.
Talking about
Um,
being scared of documents. All right, I'm throwing us off the rails. I'm so sorry.
no,
Let's go.
it's okay. I mean, I think we're totally fine to be off the rails here. I know there was
Yeah,
one kind of topic we wanted to hit here, not really in the article space around just sort of
yeah.
permissions on machines and things you guys are seeing out there when you're doing pen tests and whatnot. So you want to cue us up there on that?
Yeah, yeah. I just thought it'd be, we don't always have to talk about the news. We could talk about things that we just see a lot and maybe just have some thought-provoking conversation potentially. One of the things we do see a lot of, and look, there's might be people in this call that are not doing it, but I guarantee there are people that are, and that is just how you're structuring administrative roles, like user roles, user accounts in your environments, your internal network environments, or wherever else. Um, Gosh, you go back just 7 years ago and I was asking people, please stop giving everyone local admin or domain admin, right? Like, and now it's like people have listened, they're better about that. They're trying to segment their accounts and they're trying to be smarter about that. And we see a decent amount of staff nowadays, a decent amount of organizations who they're like IT staff or their desktop support staff or whatever. They have separate accounts. They have a standard user account that they're meant to be logged into and doing most of their day-to-day work in, and then they have like an admin account, right? Now what we see a lot of those still is that those people have a standard desktop account and they have a domain admin account. And so someone calls help desk, they need something taken care of, and that person goes and they log into that machine with their domain admin account. And the real question I'd pose to most people is, does it need to be a domain admin? Could it be in a group of desktop admins and be able to do that? Does it need to have that level of rights? And can we take different staff members, even at the administrative, the IT level and stuff like that, and put them in groups that specifically have permissions to administrate certain machines, devices, stuff like that, that they only need access to and not the other ones? I know that like everybody, if I ask that question, they're like, well, yeah, you could do that, but that's more difficult. That's whatever. One of the things, I mean, as an attacker, when you're on a machine and you're in a network and you're taking a look at logged in sessions here and there, people that are familiar with Bloodhound will map out devices, users, user permissions, administrative rights, things like that, all kinds of different things, group administrative rights and such. And when we see stuff like that, like, oh, there's a domain admin logged in here, or domain admin logged in there, or we just know that IT is using domain admins, there's a lot you can take advantage of because of that. Um, I have multiple times, for instance, and I know my people have done this before too. Um, if I get local admin for some reason, take advantage of something, or maybe someone has local admin for some whatever, I get local admin or system on a machine. Um, I'm not above staging a problem on that computer to get an admin to come log into it and investigate it and fix it. And as soon as the domain admin logs in, still their credentials and move on, right? Now, granted, yeah, if they came in with a desktop admin, at least it lets me laterally move to other domains or sorry, other desktops, right? But at least maybe it doesn't allow me to just dump your entire domain. So just one of those things to talk about. I don't know how much you kind of see on how much this might affect things on the incident response side of the house, but I know that it's something it's juicy for us. We take advantage of it constantly. It's kind of, yes, it's not flat anymore. It's not everybody's running as an admin, but we still have very little segmentation between the roles.
Yeah, and honestly, we see it a fair bit, right? So, because in general, a lot of the attacks were working, they started from a user level session, right? I mean, probably someone doing the right thing, that kind of thing, but they got something. They got a piece of malware, what a vulnerability that was taken advantage of, that kind of thing. I mean, to be fair, over the last year, we've seen a lot more outside in attacks than we used to, VPNs, that kind of thing. But leaving those aside right now, um, a lot of the times we're working through an investigation, we'll see that, Eric's account has been compromised. He was a standard user, but then all of a sudden we start seeing there's a domain admin account over here that's been compromised. The attacker's using that now. And the question we get a lot is, well, how did they get our domain admin password? It's, 12 characters long, full complexity, whatever the case may be. And, there are a lot of ways, like Eric's talking about, to take advantage of that, even, past the hashtags, things like that, just depending on kind of what's available in the environment. Um, Even weak passwords, right? I mean, that happens too. Um, so we do see it a fair bit. So one thing that I always like to mention to people as well is kind of service type accounts. I don't want to say specifically service accounts like the service account designation, but accounts that you use for a service of some sorts, right? We see this a lot with backup services. And so it may be that, only the server admins group can log into these servers to do work, and, you're locking it down really well, but there's a Veeam backup account that's out there that you made a domain admin because it needed to get to everything, and that was the easiest way to go about that. And so a lot of times those are logging into the machine pretty frequently. Those credentials may be cached, whatever, the hashes may be there, that kind of thing. And so, an attacker takes advantage of that because maybe they did move to a server admin account that does have admin on that server and can pull those things down from that Veeam account. And so we do see that pretty often. I mean, I don't, I'm not thinking of an attack we've worked where they didn't eventually end up with domain admin. And so they're going to be getting those somehow. And it's not usually that they're guessing the passwords and that kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
these
And
types
you
of
don't even,
techniques.
to be clear, you don't have to have access to a password or even a password hash. I mean, if there's a session, if I have local admin, if I have system, at level access and you're logged in, there are plenty of ways to potentially hijack that session to pull that session information and use it, right? I mean, one example is I could inject malware into a running process that you have, and then it's now acting as you and it's doing everything as you, right? There's a lot of other ways that are deeper, more complicated concepts, but it's not hard for the attackers to do it. There's a lot of tools that just do it for you. And so if you can get on that machine, you can be system on that machine that has another session, you can be that session, you can be that user, and with that person's rights. And so having those extra layers is important. And look, it's not going to stop everything. It might slow some things down. It might stop a few things, but it's something to be thinking about. Also, yeah, you brought up the service accounts. I We are seeing people be better about it in the last couple of years, but still constantly you do see where every service account is just domain admin.
Mhm.
And don't even, I mean, I've seen service accounts that are domain admin that don't even probably need admin over anything. They're just like, it's just this inherent, like, oh, we create service accounts as domain admin because one time we needed to, you know what I mean? And we
Yeah.
haven't really thought about it since. Another thing I'll pop out there just as a kind of related issue is session timeouts, forced session timeouts, especially for environments where people are like RDPing to machines to administrate them. Um, there are many times that I have seen that one, someone is doing administration to whatever servers and yada 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 with their with a domain admin account, and then two, they have non-expiring sessions, and so someone will RDP to this machine and they'll like click the X instead of logging out, and that session will live on that machine for years. Um,
Years. Yeah, I've seen
years.
them many years old. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And oftentimes there will be some kind of expiration on the credential set. So while that session is living, if we try to grab it a year later, it probably doesn't work to actually pivot to another machine. But sometimes it does. And if you have these weird accounts that some people will have where they don't change the password very often because it is this special administrative account, they don't want everybody to forget it or to lose access to it or whatever, then it can be really dangerous. Definitely just worth um, thinking about that session timeout, force session timeouts, make them force out if they don't log out properly and they exit so they can reconnect later at some time and have their desktop session back or whatever it might be. Force it to log out. Force it to log out after a couple hours. You know what I mean? Like don't let it live there.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny you kind of mentioned the injecting into running processes, right? So we saw that in an attack recently. And it was a backup process, right? There's a backup process where there actually was a vulnerability that made that even easier. And that again, it was a backup service running as a domain admin. And so they just kind of utilized that backup service to do everything in the environment. Um, yeah, so I got a question here.
Yeah, I just read
Um,
it. Sam, I'll be happy to look at your question. I'm going to send you my email address directly. Um, and
let's go.
feel free to
Yeah,
reach out to me, take a look at it. There's no charge to that. I'll just look at
yeah,
it.
yeah, definitely. So we also have the Hackle Box email address if anything like that pops up
Hmm.
as well. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, you can send it to that too. That way Pink will get an eye on it too if you send it to the Hacklebox one. But feel free to reach out to us. I have no problem answering some questions around. The question
yeah,
specifically is around ACLs, the everyone groups, various different group stuff. Just having a weird environment. I'm happy to help out with that.
yeah, yeah, just send it over. Um, yeah, I don't know. Anybody have thoughts on the kind of the how you're handling admin accounts and administration and that kind of thing? Just kind of while we're on the topic of it. I do know, I mean, just from past experience, permission delegation down to help desk and server admins, that kind of thing, it is a pain. I was actually looking in the chat here to see if Brad was on here because Brad and I went through a project like this about 10 years ago that was oh boy. Um, I'm not sure it ever got completed. We both left before that got completed, I think. But it was a nightmare. It was really, really difficult to try to do that. Some of that's in how your domains are set up, right? We were kind of working in a poorly set up domain, or at least a poorly managed domain, I'll say it that way. And so, and Active Directory is, it's funny, Active Directory is really simple and really, really complicated all at the same time. Um, you can get into some crazy scenarios.
Yeah.
Nested groups, things like that tend to be a problem as well. I think Bloodhound
Well,
calls
yeah,
those out,
especially
doesn't it?
if it's across a forest or something like that too. I mean,
Hmm.
but yeah. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, Bloodhound will call out a lot of data. Bloodhound does have a like an enterprise offering too, but I think it's better for people who are more on the defensive side, trying to understand their own organization and stuff. But it costs money, and I don't know how much it costs. So,
Yeah.
something might look into. But if you're a little bit more technical savvy and you're interested in looking at Bloodhound and pulling the data, you'll have to probably allow list it through your security tools these days or something. But you collect that data and you can kind of really start to learn how to map out some data in there, and you might start seeing stuff on your own that you're like, oh, I don't think something should map like that.
Yeah.
It's really good at showing you how one point can lead to another point. And by kind of doing that and looking from one point to another, or having it query certain chains, you can sometimes find some very interesting configurations that you didn't even realize you had.
Yeah.
We've seen some weird ones where like domain users group has like write DACL to some other group, and it's like, why would you ever have a very generic group have, you know, write permissions and kind of, you know, to other GPOs or groups or whatever. And so yeah, if you feel comfortable, you know, kind of going down that route, you might be able to find some decent stuff. But in the meantime, what I would recommend to people is just be as granular as you can
Mhm.
in assigning your permissions and roles. And I think that's pretty generic, and a lot of people kind of understand that. But if you find yourself in a situation where like, it's just this works, maybe there's a better way to do it. Maybe
Yeah.
this works today, but maybe add a note for it, put it in your change management log and stuff like that, saying, hey, I did this here, but like should come back to this at least, you know what I mean? And look at a better way to do this down the road, especially before it gets to the point where 5 years from now, one, you're like, I don't know why we did this. It might have been important. I might need it this way. Or two, you've done so many things after the fact that rely on it being that way now that you don't know how to undo it and do it right in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. I know Cliff mentioned here too, deploying, like PAM solutions and requiring MFA for all admin applications and session establishment. Definitely a good method here. Still want to be careful with kind of where those are being used because somebody like Eric can, take advantage of that.
I've
So
seen a lot of MFA in environments like that where, yes, they're good for like when these things are happening, you know, admin applications and session establishment. But then, like, once that's done and there's a session, there's something that, you know, tokens or whatever else that are getting passed around that are authenticating with those, we just get those, right? We're not, I'm not putting your username and password in every time I go to try to get on a machine. I'm doing it the same way your box is doing it, right?
yeah.
So, but yeah,
Definitely, and to be fair, definitely a really good step. Like I love
yeah,
seeing folks doing that,
absolutely.
Cliff. So that's awesome. That's huge. But like everything we talk about, there's always a way around it, right? So we're always just trying to layer as many things as we can and get it as locked down as we can and still be functional, of course. So just always something else to think about. Unfortunately, I mean that's the cat and mouse kind of game we're in is we find a way to fix something, and the baddies find a way around it,
And then we find a way to fix that.
and find a way to fix it. Yep, just keep going. So,
Keep going. All right. Well, I think we're at time.
yep,
Everybody's been great. Thank you so much. Love your
yeah.
faces, even though I can't see them. I love your face, Pink.
Hey, you
And
too.
we'll catch you guys next month. Thanks for tuning in, chatting, and keeping it lively. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
And I'm sure Dad will be back next time, so a little less fun probably.
yeah.
All
All
right.
right.
See you
Bye,
guys.
everybody.